There is a real estate crisis on our hands, but it might not have anything to do with values and prices like you might think.
I keep it real, I keep it real, I keep it real, just keep it real.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Sam Hartman, keeping it real estate in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Thank you for joining me for another deep dive where we're gonna pick apart a real estate topic, dive deep into the data, the context, and the information. Because my goal is to provide the context of the real estate news and headlines so that you can find the clarity and confidence it takes to be a strong consumer in today's real estate market. And so today we're talking about one of the topics that is truly a crisis in housing as our market stands today. But it has nothing to do with home values or depreciation or anything like that. What it has to do with is inventory. If you've paid attention to the real estate market over the last couple of years or even the last couple of months, I'm sure you've heard this topic come up. But although people know inventory is a problem in today's market, a lot of people don't understand what the root cause of that problem is. And so I want to talk about where we stand on the problem today, what has led us to this scenario, and then where might we find a way out of this, if at all possible. So let's start at where inventory is today. I have this graph here that shows the last 12 months of inventory, the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs of it. And you can see the blue bar graph shows the month supply of inventory on average across the United States. So you can see it bounces anywhere from about 2.5 months supply to just under 3.5 months of a supply. But look at the red bar as well. This is what shows how much shortage of inventory we have in the nation. We consider a balanced real estate market to be about 6 months supply of homes. And what that means is if no more homes hit the market, it would take about 6 months for all of those homes to sell. So as you can see, ranging from 2.5 to 3.5 months supply, we're pretty well short of what we would consider that balanced buyer-seller market. Anything less than 6 months, we deem a seller's market. Anything more than 6 months would be deemed a buyer's market. And here's a little note. For everyone in my market, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Allen County area, our market is running at 1.4 month supply of homes. So we, especially in our market, are extremely tight on inventory, especially as it compares even to the national average. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of these national averages. Know that our market is actually in an even dire situation when it comes to the availability of homes for sale. So I had mentioned that the inventory problem is not anything new. It's actually something that's gone on for quite a long time. And so here's a historic graph going back to 1999 showing the average month supply of homes over those years. And so you can see from 99 to 2005, we still had that below 5 month supply of homes, making it a seller's market. But here's what has kind of happened in everyone's mind. We're suffering from recency bias, where we remember the housing crash and the influx of inventory of homes that resulted from then. So you can see leading up to the housing crash, 2006, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, we had these elevated levels of inventory built on the backs of financing that should have never been given to home buyers, which led to a foreclosure crisis, which led to a large influx of inventory during this housing crisis, this housing crash that happened in 2008. But since then, 2012, 13, 14, we've started to see inventory begin to shrink year after year after year to where we are now today. We actually are seeing slight increases in inventory, but the historicness of these low levels is it's not making much of a dent in that buyer demand and the supply economics of it all. So we cleared that up. We know that inventory is a problem, but why is it a problem? What are the causes that have led to this effect? And one of the first things I want to look at is the longevity of homeowners living in their homes. From 1985 to 2009, a homeowner averaged about 6 years living in their home before they would move again. But from 2010 to today, that number has actually increased to between 9 and 10 years. So you can see the turnover of home ownership, the turnover of homes is a big factor in reduced inventory. If people aren't moving as often, there aren't sales happening as often of that one specific home. So you're going to obviously see a reduced level of inventory due to that fact alone. Reason number 2 for record low inventory is the new construction sector. Now, we all remember back to 2008, and we all remember the dire effects that happened to homeowners that suffered foreclosures, losing their homes. Even if you didn't lose your home, you certainly felt the pinch of the economy during that time. And guess who else felt the pinch of the economy at that time? Home builders. A lot of home builders went out of business after the housing crash of 2008. And if they didn't go out of business, they severely reduced the number of homes that they were building every year. So from that time, from 2008 to today, we actually had a severe underbuilding of new construction homes coming to the market. And remember what I just said, the average homeowner used to live in their home for 6 years, now it's closer to 9 years. So if we have a 10 to 14 year period where homes were not being built at a rate, those homes were never being put into the supply chain for housing. So those homes are now not coming for sale when those homeowners are hitting that 6, 7, 8, 9 year mark, when they would maybe be upsizing their lives or downsizing their lives or making life changes. Those homes were never put into the circulation of supply, so they're not there to sell now. And this is a huge reason why our inventory problem is not just a problem today, but a problem for years to come. So how big is this problem? How big is this inventory problem? We've got some experts that project how short inventory is across the nation. And from Realtor.com showing over 5 million homes as a shortage, to Moody Analytics on the low end showing 1.6 million homes as a shortage. Don't focus on the discrepancy of the differences in these numbers. Focus on how large these numbers are. On average, in the United States, about 5 million to 5.5 million homes sell every year. So even on the low end of the Moody Analytics number, we're basically 3 full years of homes short in getting this supply into the market. That is a drastically large number to be short. And is it something that new construction is going to fix? Personally, I don't think so. I don't think you can build homes affordably enough. You can't build them quick enough to make a dent in this problem right now. Trust me, builders are trying. New builders are coming to the market. They're trying to find ways to incentivize buyers and try to make them affordable. But the fact of the matter is, labor is expensive, materials are expensive, and to build a new home, that cost is just rising and rising. So the inventory of homes is growing partly because of new construction, but it's not really necessarily helping the affordability level for a lot of consumers out there. And there's a third reason that inventory is remaining extremely low in today's market. And that's because the listing inventory, the new listing inventory coming to market, is at record lows. Here's a graph since January of 2017. And you see the ebbs and flows of the seasonality of the real estate market. You see the peaks of new listing inventory, which usually happens in the early summer, May, June, those types of dates. And then going into the fall, it starts to reduce through the winter and then starts to pick up again in January. And you kind of see the little bell curve, the little peaks and valleys of that seasonality. But since 2017, it's been on a decline year after year after year. And even though recently we've had a little bit of a bump up, you can see how much lower those numbers are than was typically normal back in the 2017 going forward, those couple of years before the pandemic. So we're just not receiving new listings at a rate that we maybe used to expect, which is keeping inventory drastically low. Here's another view of that same new listing inventory problem. And this shows that same data just in a different graph, and each year is graphed with a different line, different color. And the dotted blue line is where we're at this year. Look how far below those other years we are for new listing inventory. Look at that. It is drastically below every year. The only year that even touches this line is when the pandemic hit and no one listed their home. And that was a very short blip in 2020, and then inventory started to increase once we were kind of released back to the market, once we realized that we could still buy homes, that the market wasn't crashing, that this was a very unique health pandemic, but it was not a pandemic that was going to affect the housing market. People started getting back out home shopping, and people started selling their homes even in the midst of COVID. So that's the only year that even dips below where we're at with new listing inventory in today's market. So this is just another picture of how drastically low we are on inventory today. So those are three main reasons inventory remains low and that we see as challenges to the real estate market as to keeping inventory low for the foreseeable future. Now, I want to touch on that third reason, new listing inventory, because that is going to be the key to helping get us out of this inventory problem, helping get us into a spot where more inventory is trading hands, becoming available, existing homes selling that are 10, 15, 20, 30-year-old homes that sell at a bit more of a value for consumers than, say, the new construction of today. And so one of the key reasons that new listing inventory is being beaten down and staying low is due to mortgage rates. Mortgage rates saw a really unique thing happen in the last 18 months where they went from record low rates in the 3%, some people even getting rates in the 2%, to more than doubling, where we actually saw our peak just a few weeks ago at over 7.5%. So that's a 4.5% increase in interest rates alone. And so sellers are looking at their financial picture, they're looking at their housing situation, and they're saying, do we want to move in this current climate? Do we want to trade in our 3% interest rate for a much higher rate to make this life change? And if sellers are comfortable, if they don't have a major life circumstance, like say a death in the family, new babies to the family, a marriage, maybe a divorce, maybe kids moving out of the house. These are kind of the big life changes that usually lead to some sort of a move. If a seller doesn't have that happening in their lives, if they don't have the pain or the pleasure that really motivates them to make a housing change, then they're not really gonna even consider a sale or a move as an option. So here's a quote from Danielle Hale, the chief economist for Realtor.com. And Danielle drives this point home further by saying interest rate hikes continue to further cut into buyers' purchasing power. Although they appear to have adapted to the higher mortgage rate environment faster than sellers, many of whom are still on the sidelines, locked into a lower interest rate and unwilling to cash in their home's equity to purchase another home. And so Danielle makes an interesting statement there. She says locked in. And we're calling this the lock-in effect, where sellers feel locked to their house. They feel chained to their house and their mortgage rate because to make a move is going to be more expensive. A lot of home sellers, maybe they're looking to downsize and buy a cheaper home because of interest rates rising. Their payment still might be more expensive. But stay with me. Next week I've got a really great video coming out that's going to dive deeper into how home sellers can leverage their equity to make a home move make sense for them. But with that being said, this is how sellers are feeling. And here's another graph. Here's another bar graph showing that picture in a little bit different light, that almost 71% of mortgages are less than 4%. So that's almost 3/4 of homeowners out there. They don't want to move because they've got a great rate. Maybe they do want to move, but they feel locked in because of that. So Only 5% of current mortgages have an interest rate between 5 and 6%. Only 4% have one over 6%. So that's a very small percentage. A lot of those people have probably bought a house within the last year. So this picture is just kind of further driving home that lock-in effect that sellers are feeling right now. But here's the good news, is that with the affordability of interest rates hopefully reducing in the coming months and coming years, sellers do expect to make a move. About 1 in 4 homeowners say that they will plan to move and sell their home in the next 4 years. And that is actually up from like a typical 16-17% average of what homeowners say are willing to sell in the next 3 years. That's almost a 10% increase. So that could be a bump in inventory in the coming 3 years if the interest rates get to a point that sellers feel comfortable making that life transition, and buyers will benefit because that'll be more inventory and more options. But again, is that going to solve our inventory problem? I don't think so. It will help, but it's not going to make a drastic swing in the inventory of the market. Now I want to look at a Zillow survey that actually said that homeowners with a mortgage rate above 5% are more than twice as likely to move than someone with a mortgage rate below 5%. Again, this is showing that lock-in effect. If someone has a smaller gap between today's mortgage rate and where their mortgage rate is currently, they're going to be more likely to make that move and sell. So with all that being said, we're talking about inventory, we're talking about mortgage rates. Is there any silver lining? Is there anything positive or good to look forward to or to project into the future for? And I think I do have some good news for both home sellers and home buyers out there. This is a chart showing inflation and the correlation between inflation and the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. And as you can see, very typically, over the history of time, the inflation rate and the 30-year fixed mortgage rate are correlated together, although usually a little bit of a lagging measure. So when inflation rises, typically interest rates will rise. That's because it's one of the government's tools to help curb inflation. By making the borrowing of money more expensive, they can reduce the amount of money that is in the market today. So when inflation rises, interest rates tend to follow and rise as well. Now, when inflation decreases, which we've been feeling the government's pain points of really trying to force inflation down. When inflation decreases, mortgage rates tend to decrease. So let's look at the far right section of this graph here. We see that blue line showing a sharp decrease in the inflation rate. So the correlation and the previous experience with this correlated data would tell us that interest rates should follow shortly behind, coming down with this data as well. So this is good news. This is not a projection on my part. This is just looking at the historic data, just looking at how things correlate together over time, saying, well, if inflation is coming down and we get it down to that point where the government's happy and fine with it, mortgage rates are going to come down as well. Now here are some projections, and these aren't from me because I don't want you guys to point your finger and tell me I'm wrong. But these are from 3 different expert entities: Fannie Mae, Mortgage Bankers Association, and the National Association of Realtors. And so you can see by Q4 of 23, they're projecting rates to drop by almost 1% from where they're at today, under 6.3%. Q1 of 2024, just about over 6%, and then Q2 even getting down into the 5%. So that's phenomenal news. This would be a huge benefit to buyers in the real estate market. I think buyers are going to see a lot of competition if rates get down this low. So you need to be prepared as a buyer when this happens. It's going to help affordability, but you might see yourself having more competition for the homes you want to buy next year as well. So keep that in mind. With this good news, it's not always good news. There's always going to be challenges in life, and you need to plan ahead and think ahead. And guess what? Having an expert realtor on your side is going to help you answer answer some of those questions, put that game plan together, and make sure you're a winner when the time comes for you to buy a house. And then lastly, 1 in 4 homeowners here say that higher mortgage rates would actually not impact their decision to sell their home at all. But this number, this 1 in 4, is largely driven by the baby boomer demographic. And guess why that is? Well, those baby boomers have a tremendous amount of equity in their home. A large chunk of them don't have a mortgage on their home at all. So their home is this huge asset that they can leverage against to buy the next home cash, or put such a large down payment down on their next home that the interest payment is going to be pretty minimal difference at that price point anyway. So that baby boomer demographic is a large demographic that we're looking to as part of what could help bring more inventory to the market, because they're the ones that really can best afford to make a move in today's real estate market as it stands. And with all of that doom and gloom considered, it feels like a lot of challenges and a lot of bad news. But here's a phenomenal survey that I think really paints a picture well about housing and real estate and people making decisions not necessarily based off of the one financial piece of the puzzle. People make real estate decisions based off their lives, based off their needs, based off the pain and the pleasure that a real estate move could either alleviate their pain or provide them pleasure by having. And so here we go. Here's 3 situations. What would you give up to make mortgage rates more affordable on your new home? Would you not relocate to take a higher paying job? 10% of people said that they would not relocate to keep their low mortgage rate. But that means 90% of consumers would relocate. Again, pain and pleasure. The pleasure of a new job, the pleasure of a higher income, the pleasure of a relocation to a city or a state or an area where you want to live. 90% of consumers are going to make that move no matter what. How about continuing to live with a spouse or a partner after you split up? That's only 7% of consumers would be willing to do that. 93% are going to get out of that situation. You're splitting up, it's an unhealthy situation, it's not going to be any better by continuing to live there. That is probably going to be a financial struggle for a lot of people to make that transition, but you know what they say about divorce, it's expensive because it's worth it. Family law attorney friends told me that. I didn't make that up, don't hold me to that. I love my wife very much. And then lastly, would you keep your child in an undesirable school district? And this is the lowest percentage of people that would do that, because we're all great parents. We all love our kids. Only 4% of consumers say they would stay put, and 96% would still make that move for their family, because the pain of a bad school system and the pleasure of a good school system is enough to draw them away. That's 96%. So again, people don't just move because the finances make sense. People don't just move because we could make a bunch of money selling our house, or we could buy low and sell high. People buy when the time is right for them. People buy when their kids are getting into school age. They buy when their kids are, when they're starting their family. They buy when their family gets split apart, sadly. They buy when, sadly, their family's split apart by death. And there's lots of reasons. There's lots of reasons to it all, but people move when the pain of life or the draw of pleasure of life compels them to move. So I'm not telling you don't pay attention to the financial ramifications. That is a huge piece of the puzzle. People not paying attention to the financial decisions is what led to the housing crash of 2008. But I'm telling you, look at the financials based off of what your family's needs, wants, pains, and pleasures are. I hope that helps paint a more clear picture of inventory with where we're at today and where we are going in the future. I don't think this is a problem solved anytime soon. So let's put our heads down, Let's work with what we've got, and let's make great decisions for our families based off of what we have to work with today. I'd love to answer your questions about real estate. Leave me a comment, send me a message. I'm always here to help. This is Sam Hartman, Keeping It Real Estate. Thanks for joining me today, guys.
I keep it real, just keep it real.